She didn't cry when she said it. That's the part that still won't leave me. My brother was standing in the hallway, holding his keys like he'd forgotten what they were for, and his wife calmly explained that she was in love with someone else. No shaking voice. No hesitation. Just facts, delivered like she was returning something she no longer needed. He asked if this was a joke. She sighed, irritated, and said she'd been unhappy for a while. That she deserved honesty. That leaving was the brave thing to do. I watched his face change, confusion collapsing into something hollow, and realized I'd known about the other man before this moment. Long enough to stop it. Long enough to warn him. She kept talking, already planning her exit, while my brother stood there breaking in real time. And in that instant, the truth hit me harder than her words ever could. This wasn't just her walking away from a marriage. This was the moment my silence finally caught up with us, and there was no way to take it back. No one saw it coming. That's what everyone kept saying, and for once, it was true. Their marriage was the kind people used as reassurance, proof that commitment still meant something. 10 years together. A shared house. Shared routines. Inside jokes that made you feel like an outsider if you weren't paying attention. They moved through life like a practice team. Family gatherings always ended with someone commenting on how solid they were. How calm. How grown up. She played the role perfectly, supportive, organized, endlessly reasonable. If there were disagreements, they were handled quietly, privately, the way healthy couples were supposed to do it. My brother believed in that stability with his whole heart. He planned years ahead because he trusted the ground beneath him. Vacations. Renovations. A future that assumed she would always be there. He talked about her like she was permanent. And that's why her leaving hit so hard. It wasn't just the loss of a why. Looking back, the signs were everywhere, just quiet enough to ignore. She became distant in ways that were easy to explain away. Longer hours at work. New interests my brother wasn't part of. A phone that never left her hand, always tilted away, always checked before she spoke. None of it screamed betrayal. It whispered it. She started criticizing him in subtle ways, always framed as concern. He was too comfortable, not growing, stuck. I noticed how often she compared their life to others, how dissatisfaction slowly replaced gratitude. My brother laughed it off, convinced every marriage went through phases. The biggest shift was emotional. She stopped leaning into him. Physical affection faded. Conversations felt transactional. When I asked her if everything was okay, she smiled and said, of course, a little too quickly. I remember thinking something was wrong, not wrong enough to accuse, but wrong enough to make my stomach tighten. And still, I told myself it wasn't my place. That noticing wasn't the same as knowing. That was my first mistake. He didn't arrive suddenly. He slipped into the story quietly, almost invisibly. A name mentioned in passing. A coworker who understood her. Someone who made her feel seen. She never framed him as a threat, just background noise I was never meant to focus on. But he was always there. Texts she answered too quickly. Calls she stepped outside to take. Stories about work that somehow revolved around him without saying his name too often. When I asked questions, she laughed and said I was being dramatic. That he was married too. That it was harmless. Once, she told me, almost proudly, he listens in a way your brother doesn't anymore. That sentence landed wrong. It felt intimate. Disloyal. She noticed my reaction and softened immediately, telling me I was misreading it. That nothing was happening. I wanted to believe her. After that, the unease didn't leave me. It followed me home, into late nights and half-finished thoughts. I replayed her words again and again, trying to decide whether I was being paranoid or perceptive. I knew something had shifted, but knowing what to do with that knowledge was another matter entirely. I almost told my brother once. He was talking about how lucky he felt, how stable everything finally seemed. I watched his face light up when he mentioned her, and the words froze in my throat. I pictured the damage I could cause if I was wrong. The look on his face if I planted a doubt that never grew into truth. So I hesitated. I asked indirect questions instead. I watched her reactions. She never panicked. She never slipped. She met my concern with calm reassurance, making me feel unreasonable for doubting her. My doubt turned inward. Maybe I was projecting. Maybe I was imagining cracks because I was afraid of losing what we had. And with every day I stayed silent, the line between caution and cowardice blurred just a little more. Silence didn't feel like a decision at first. It felt like postponement. I told myself I was waiting for clarity, for proof, for the right moment that never came. Each day I didn't speak made it easier to explain why I shouldn't speak the next one. I started collecting excuses instead of answers. It's their marriage. I don't know the full story. If she was really unhappy, that's between them. Every justification sounded reasonable when repeated enough times. Family members reinforced it without realizing it, talking about patience, about how relationships evolve, about how love isn't simple. She noticed my hesitation and used it. Framed my silence as understanding, as maturity. Once, she told me quietly, "I'm glad you're not the kind of person who creates drama." It felt like praise. It was pressure. By the time I realized what I was doing, silence had stopped being passive. It had become active participation. When she finally left, she called it honesty. She said she couldn't keep lying anymore, that she owed my brother the truth. She packed a single suitcase and spoke in calm, careful sentences, as if choosing the right words could soften the damage. She didn't mention his name at first, the other man, only that she had found something real. My brother kept asking what he'd done wrong. She shook her head and said it wasn't about him. That she had just grown. Outgrown the marriage. Outgrown the life they built together. Hearing her frame betrayal as self-discovery made my stomach turn. The other man appeared quickly after that. Too quickly to be new. A friend who suddenly had space for her, time for her, a future planned. Watching it unfold confirmed what I'd already known. This ending had been written long before she ever said goodbye. And standing there, watching my brother try to understand a story that made no sense, I realized silence hadn't delayed the pain. It had only guaranteed its worst version. The news hit the family like a freight train. Calls, messages, stunned faces. My parents couldn't hide their disbelief, though they tried to sound supportive. "Maybe she just needs space," Mom said, her voice trembling. Dad stayed silent, his jaw tight, eyes darting between my brother and his departing wife. Aunt Linda tried to offer comfort, but ended up defending the very person who'd shattered us. "She's only following her heart," she said. Cousins nodded, murmuring about life changes and self-discovery. No one seemed to grasp the cruelty of timing, the cold calculation behind her honesty. And there was my brother, standing in the middle of the room, suitcase in hand, trying to make sense of people who were supposed to love him. His shock wasn't quiet. It was raw, silent screams echoing in the pit of his chest. For the first time, it became clear, this wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was a collective blind spot, one the family would struggle to reconcile. In the days that followed, my brother became a ghost of himself. He moved through the house silently, touching things without seeing them, answering questions without hearing them. Sleep abandoned him. He stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying every laugh, every tender moment, every "I love you" she ever whispered. He asked the same questions over and over. Was I not enough? Did I fail? Could I have stopped this? No answer came that could soothe the hollow ache inside him. Friends reached out, but even their concern felt distant, like noise from another world. The hardest part was the quiet. The house, once filled with warmth and laughter, was now an echo chamber of loss. And yet, beneath the despair, something subtle stirred, a glimmer of awareness that he could survive this. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. He couldn't undo the betrayal, but maybe he could reclaim himself. At first, she seemed unstoppable. Pictures on social media, stories of romantic dinners, weekends in exotic locations, a sparkling new life that dazzled everyone. Friends whispered about her courage, her freedom, her perfect choice. She smiled for the camera, radiant, untouchable. But cracks appeared quickly, small but sharp. Late-night texts revealed arguments she couldn't hide, moments of doubt she tried to mask with filters and captions. Her friend was controlling in ways that mimicked the very life she had left, and her laughter, once confident, now occasionally trembled. Watching from afar, I felt no pity, just clarity. The life she had chosen wasn't the paradise she promised herself. It was a fragile mirage, and every carefully curated post was a desperate attempt to convince herself it was real. Meanwhile, the family she abandoned was left to pick up the pieces, learning that the perfect escape was anything but. It didn't take long for the cracks to widen into chasms. The new man's charm faded, replaced by controlling habits and impatience. Promises of adventure turned into arguments, plans into criticism. Her carefully constructed image of freedom began to crumble, and for the first time, she couldn't post a smile that felt real. Messages she once sent to boast of happiness were now apologies, excuses, and frustration. The life she thought she wanted revealed itself as a cage, one she had chosen willingly. The excitement, the novelty, the thrill, it was gone, leaving only the weight of mistakes. Meanwhile, my brother, once broken, began to rebuild quietly. Each day, each small victory, each laugh he allowed himself, became proof that leaving didn't destroy him, it transformed him. And as reality tightened its grip on her, the balance of power shifted. The woman who once walked away, confident and untouchable, was now confronted with the truth. Freedom without responsibility is fleeting. Months later, she came back. Not with apologies or humility, but with a practiced smile and rehearsed words. "I made a mistake," she said softly, as if that could erase the months of betrayal. "I realize now what I had, and I want it back." The family listened, divided between shock and sympathy. Some urged my brother to forgive, to consider her regret. But he looked at her not with anger, but with clarity. The man who once clung desperately was gone. In his place stood someone who knew his worth. She tried every tactic: charm, guilt, promises, even tears. But he didn't flinch. His silence spoke louder than any argument. This wasn't about pride or revenge, it was about respect, for himself and for the life he was rebuilding. Finally, she understood. The door she had slammed shut on her past could not be reopened. Not today, not ever. Some choices are permanent, and some doors, once closed, remain closed forever. The tables had turned. Where once she held all the cards, charm, manipulation, and the illusion of control, now my brother stood firm, unshakable. The family, who had tiptoed around her ego, now saw the truth. Their whispers of sympathy faded, replaced by hesitant acknowledgement. She had gambled and lost. Conversations shifted. Invitations that once included her were quietly canceled. Her calls went unanswered. Friends who had admired her independence began to notice the cracks she had desperately tried to hide. Meanwhile, my brother moved forward with quiet confidence, reclaiming his space, his choices, his dignity. For the first time, she experienced the isolation she had inflicted on him. The power she once wielded effortlessly over him, over the family, was gone. And in that shift, a lesson emerged, as clear as daylight. Leaving might feel liberating, but the cost of trying to return to what you destroyed is immeasurable. Her choices rippled farther than she ever imagined. Friends who once envied her now kept their distance, unsure where her loyalty or honesty truly lay. The new man, once a symbol of excitement, proved controlling and unreliable. She realized too late that the life she had pursued so eagerly was fragile, built on illusions and fleeting thrills. Meanwhile, my brother found strength in the ruins. He repaired relationships, rediscovered passions, and surrounded himself with people who valued him. Each step forward reminded him that loss, though painful, can be transformative. Even the family began to see the truth. Loyalty, trust, and integrity are not just words, they're boundaries. And crossing them has consequences. She had left, believing she was gaining freedom, only to discover that every action carries weight. Some debts, emotional or otherwise, cannot be repaid, and some doors, once closed, are never reopened. In the end, the story settled like dust after a storm. My brother, once shattered, had rebuilt himself stronger, wiser, and more self-respecting than ever. He no longer waited for apologies or begged for recognition. He simply lived, proof that betrayal does not define the betrayed. She, on the other hand, faced the consequences of her choices alone. The life she thought she wanted slipped through her fingers, leaving only regret and the bitter taste of reality. Freedom without responsibility, she learned, is fleeting. And the lesson crystallized for everyone who witnessed it: leaving is a choice, returning is a privilege, and not everyone who walks away has the right to come back. Some doors, once closed, stay closed, and some hearts, once broken, refuse to reopen.